Well, around 17 or 18 years ago, I came to St Matthew's and spent a couple of wonderful and memorable years here as deacon and curate under the tutelage of one Glenn Cardy and his offsider, Clay Nelson. And so it's a real pleasure for me to be here with you this morning. I see old faces, welcome to me, and new faces. It's really lovely. These were, just to have a bit of a recap, these were fascinating, colourful, learning years with wild and famous billboards. You remember the ones at the side there that went global. Frequently they were over the top theologically, challenging indeed sometimes, yet also on the sort of hip side and on the edge that spoke loudly to many. It was a really dynamic time. I recall several Christmas Eve carol services where the place was jammed up with people, stacked to the gunnels, stepping over people sitting all up through the chancel on Christmas Eve. The buzz was really great. The anticipation, the light, the shadows and the beauty, the music soaring as only that you can get in this exquisite building, this church. And then the thrill of the first labyrinth with its meditative flickering flames in the evening. So many people from all walks of life coming through, including some classes from enlightened schools, people from different faith to no faith, elderly people with walking sticks and children who danced around and then said, "Can I go around again, please, Mum?" Parish Sunday picnics at the beach, complete with the three-legged race and the sack race and the egg and spoon race, all those sorts of things, with a swim and a barbecue, the deck chairs for those who just want to sit and watch the more energetic of us. It was quite the perfect day. Such fellowship, such love, such fun and laughter together. I remember Paul Reeves, who shared an interfaith service with me one Sunday, started on Sunday afternoon, and he just came and spoke for a half an hour before we began. And what mana, what an incredible man he was. I really miss people of that integrity, that grace, and that true, real depth of Christianity. Then to Armistice Day. We used to have Armistice Day services here with brass bands on the go and all the traditional regalia and the sombre remembrance. It was wonderful. And I remember blessing the stuffed animal of a troubled young woman who so loved her soft pink, our toy on St. Francis Day. To the odd rat in a cage and miniature horses and even a small bull in the baptistry, with the barnyard smell still lingering. The Tamils, big conflict in Sri Lanka between the two major peoples there, terrible conflict. And we had a service here, or they held a service, which I helped in, bridging the gap between the two of these peoples and praying for peace, still exhibiting that grand spirit of radical protest that infused a lot of the people still here. And I think of George Armstrong. I don't know whether you're here, George, but anyway, the legacy of such major protests as the final Springbok tour, those sorts of things. From here, St Matthew's, justice and courage, living well, living the way of Christ. But lots of laughter and lots of respect, and specifically an openness to ideas and exploration of what it means to be a Christian in the here and now, in Auckland, New Zealand, with our ever more secular culture, and globally in the 21st century, with its rapid technological change that makes some of us wish for simpler times. But laughing, questioning, listening together in this community, remembering and hoping and praying. And so, through to all of us here who continue this tradition, responding to that divine touch that is part of us, to the call in that moment to goodness, to the revelation of beauty that arrives unbidden and changes us, to that surrender to our heart's longing, to know, to witness, to challenge, to give thanks, to believe, and like Thomas, to see. that mystical, wordless reality that brings us here to sing and pray together this morning, each Sunday morning, to be people of the way of Jesus in our time, in space. Well, today is Low Sunday. We wind down from the heady heights of Easter Day, and we quietly recover and get down to discovering once again what it all might mean. To us individually, as we chart our faith journey across the landscape of our lives as they shift and change, and to us all here collectively as church. We are an Easter people. Easter defines us. And as we know, the events of Easter changed the world. And there's 2.4 billion of us out there. It's a pretty cool and big statistic. And so, risking tedium retelling the story that gathers us, around 2,000 years ago, an itinerant rabbi called Jesus, a faithful Jew who walked the way of the prophets and the great wisdom teachers, called out powers and people for their laxness, their greed, their corruption, and their cruelty. A healer of souls, a miracle worker, a friend, a comrade, a visionary, he challenged the status quo and condemned the system. For 3 years he strode the byways and highways of his land, crucially listening to God, praying, gathering a raggle-taggle group of followers about him, preaching, teaching, and being mobbed by people hungry to hear his message of hope and liberation. The masses, people without hope or power, the last and the least who were oppressed and exploited by the establishment of the day. And the culmination, the fulfillment, is Easter. Easter is a quantum leap. It's a profound shift from this wandering, charismatic rabbi who affronts and exposes the elites and religious powers of the temple. A man who becomes such a threat, so challenging to the status quo, that he is executed, crucified, destroyed, dead and gone. The elites, the religious and secular, must have breathed a sigh of relief, gone off to their properties and palaces, laid down on their couches and had another glass of wine. Bring on the dancing girls, let's celebrate, they thought. But it wasn't quite like that, was it? And here we are today, 2,000 years later, attesting to that. Easter, celebrations of a very different kind. One theologian put it this way: Easter is at the heart of the Christian faith. It celebrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ and gives us hope that our lives will be better in the days to come. It grounds hope in the saying, truth crushed to the ground will rise again. Justice, social, religious, economic, political, justice, equality, these things are at the heart of Jesus' teachings. The belief in better days, in hope, truth, mercy, liberation from fear. We are with Thomas, and as it was in our reading, we're with Thomas as he rolls his eyes at his friend's claims of seeing Jesus alive. Thomas, who was really every man, every woman, all of us, in that heightened time, we too would be skeptical and want to see this living person who we thought had been crucified, or who was crucified. A week later, he gets the chance to say, "Show me." And Jesus does show him intimately. His wounds, his words, his very presence. Something inexplicable happens that prompts the answer from Thomas, that is the faith proclamation about Jesus, the first declaration, of my Lord and my God. Jesus breaks the chains of death and annihilation to remain real and present to those who believe in him. And in that reading, there is the final beatitude where he blesses us, those of us who believe without having seen. Jesus breathes on his disciples, just as God did in the Garden of Eden to Adam in Genesis, and later to an army of skeletons in the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel. It's clear that this, the first Easter, is seen as the beginning of a new creation. This breathing on them, the kiss of life, changed, transformed life in Jesus Christ. One of the big questions that has been around forever, perhaps the biggest, is around the divine nature of Jesus, or more correctly, the transition or expression of God in Jesus the man, to where he became Christ, embodying the divine. Not just the son of a carpenter, son of Mary, an inspired and radical teacher, preacher, sage, truth-teller, or healer any longer, but something cosmically different, becoming part of and expressing the creative force that made us, that we call God. I remember studying Christology many moons ago, and we covered lots of theological opinions over time, expressing understandings, and I'll give you a couple. The first one was the idea that Jesus was already divine at birth and could do no wrong. I have a Roman Catholic friend who believes that, and he thinks that Jesus did blow on the on these small little figurines of birds, and they flew off, and so Jesus was pure all his life. But the Nicene Creed, which is seen as the defining statement of Christianity to mainstream churches, says of Jesus, begotten, not made, and it sort of buys into this idea. And then to the idea that he increasingly, over his life, and particularly his ministry, that Jesus became so woven into the numinous, riven with God, expressing the divine will for humankind, that when he said yes to God and was crucified on the cross, he became the final revelation, embodying God, and so continues divine in our hearts and lives. There's lots more, but I won't go into those. But at Easter, Jesus becomes metaphorically the final and unique Passover lamb who gives his life for us. A new transformed life in the harsh culture of the time and down to today. Most significantly, he brings the gift of forgiveness and redemption into a world that needs it desperately. A world back then of violent retribution to today's world with their wars and horrors. We are given the gift through him of self-reflection and being able to start over again and again and again and again. Such is divine love. Easter, the shift from the itinerant, charismatic, truth-telling, healing and challenging rabbi to the crown of divinity for all time, touching me and you here and now. It's real, and it's a real mystery too, at the same time. It's something that we experience personally and something that we hold and live together. I'm not a literalist, yet this story presents a mystical reality that undergirds our faith story. My theological convictions have broadened and retracted and moved. They've shifted and developed markedly over time, as I imagine yours have. And as Socrates said, the more I learn, the less I realize I know. However, I believe we are all like the wondering, amazed, ecstatic, and very, very fearful human disciples in that upper room. We long for what Jesus teaches and proclaims, and we hope for a better world, a more just world where everyone counts and can live in peace, where Palestinian lives are just as precious as our own, and where the longing for peace and care for such horrendous suffering galvanizes us into action. I have yet to see true public condemnation of Israel's actions in the US or the UK or from any church group. Please tell me if I'm wrong. But I believe that Jesus would be at the forefront of such a call, and so should we. As a Palestinian pastor said at Christmas, Christ is in the rubble indeed. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the billboard outside, and I wanted to come and start writing things on it and doing all that sort of stuff. Maybe it should be a public place where we can proclaim and protest about such atrocities as this. We are a fearful bunch, we humans, and really only Jesus can give us the courage and inspiration to rise above this. Today, Low Sunday, is the end of the Easter octave, and our gospel continues the story of the resurrection, as we heard. Now risen, the revolutionary work, the saving work of Jesus was completed and continues on to the here and now. In the 19th century, there was a poet called Arthur Hugh Clough. He was best known for his poetry that sprang from his intense religious doubts, and he was a huge influence on T.S. Eliot. And I'll finish with these words. Though dead, not dead. Not gone, though fled. Not lost, though vanished. In the great gospel and true creed, he is yet risen indeed. Christ is yet risen. Amen.